people your spouse should not share private details with. Yep, we're going there, y'all. We're going to talk about the conversation that many married couples have, or situations that they deal with, boundaries, all of those different things. That's what we're getting into. Before we do, make sure you hit that thumbs up. But let's talk. So how do we approach this conversation? You got married couples that sometimes have the challenge of people, friends. I know girls, y'all be having y'all friends that y'all be on the phone with. And some of them are married, some of them single, but you keep them alone. I don't know why. But sometimes y'all be talking about stuff, and there's this temptation, I think, that men and women deal with, where when you're having something going on, it's hard for you not to want to disclose those things with people, especially people that you're close with. But there are people that you should not share these private details with.
Yeah.
I'm going to let you go first. Who is the first type of person that we should not share private details of our relationship, of our marriage with?
Right before I say that, I want to back up, because if you are married, and I don't care, you married for 1 month or 10,000 years, I don't care. You are going to have some issues arise, right? So we're speaking to that right now. We're saying when those problems come, when those disagreements come, what are you going to do about it? And a lot of times, like, the other person may not be trying to hear you, right? There's times where we have arguments. It's like, okay, we need to step away. But you need to go confide in someone.
Yeah.
So we're talking about who you shouldn't.
We're talking about shouldn't. Yeah, we're not talking about, we're not saying don't confide in anybody, but there is people that you shouldn't. Who's the first type of person?
I would say your single best friend.
Oh, okay. So what I talked about already. Okay. Why? But why though?
The reason why
what if they're your bestie?
Okay. The reason why I said that specifically, your best friend, is because y'all super close. So y'all probably tell each other about everything, right? Y'all probably have known each other for a lot of years, things like that. Maybe it was in your wedding. Who knows? But here's the thing. They're single. And so when you're single, you are a free agent. You can do what you want. If something is not how you want it, or, not to your standards, you can drop them. Period. That's not it. Keep it moving. That's what you can do. Now, if this is your bestie and they know you, and they know when you're at your happiest, they know when you're sad and you're not yourself, whatever. They're looking at that, and they're looking for your greater good, period, when you were single, now that you're married, whatever. So you're having these deep problems with your spouse. You should not be going to them, because they're going to always want you just to be happy, typically. Not necessarily about, not if you're right, not if they're right, but how can you get to this conclusion of where we can get back in good graces with each other.
Right.
And so those deep things within the marriage, I don't know what the argument is about, you probably shouldn't be going to them.
And if I can add to that, so what really makes this, I think, more significant is understanding when people are in different seasons of life, understanding what they have to give to you in a particular area and what they don't have to give to you. One of the issues with single people, and this is not even just exclusively in marriage, but this even applies to dating in some ways. A lot of times you're talking to somebody about your significant other, and they don't understand the dynamic of your relationship enough to really speak into it. And some of them don't even have relationships themselves that they can relate to in it. So they can't even speak to that. Like, oh, I would have dropped them in a heartbeat, or, oh, I would leave that person.
Exactly.
The issue is you'll sometimes disclose stuff to this person, and it sounds like that relationship gonna be over. Then a week later, it's like nothing ever was wrong, and it's like, what was that about?
Girl, I was tripping. We good.
But what happens is those friends don't forget that stuff, and it shapes. And so, especially the more immature ones that aren't married, that don't understand that, you could be beefing just 5 minutes ago, but you got to figure it out and get it together and move on. And that happens a lot more in marriage than in dating. And if you don't have that experience, you may not get that. So I agree completely with that. Another type of person, this one is tricky, because so when we talk about private details, this one could be tricky, but I also think this is important. This isn't completely all private details, because there may be scenarios, and I'll give some caveats with this, but people who have had failed marriages, people with failed marriages. And here's what I mean by that, because this gets tricky, because if someone went through some crazy stuff in their marriage, you would think if you're hitting a hard point in yours, you could talk to that person because they've been there. They might be able to help you avoid some crazy stuff. They might be able to help you out and give you some advice because they went through some stuff and mishandled. Like, I could imagine myself talking to my mom about some things, because she had experienced the divorce, I can imagine myself getting advice like, how would you handle this? And she might have maturity now and to be able to be so into it. The problem is that's not always equal. It's not always the equal. So sometimes a parent, it might be more helpful from, but in general, when you start talking about people that have been divorced, even like people, when they find out you're getting married, they're like, okay, girl, understand it's going to be hard or it's not easy. There's all these types of sayings that you hear, good luck, all this stuff. And it's like, just because your marriage failed doesn't mean that I need this type of energy. I need all these words spoken over my marriage.
Yeah.
Because I'm not married to the same person you married to. I'm not you. So sometimes people that have went through failed marriages are not always the best people to have you disclosing these things to. Because number one, when we're thinking about actually having successful anything in life, like if you're trying to have a successful business, do you go to a failed business owner, a former business owner, and ask him how to start up a business? Think about where you go for advice on things. Like you go to people that have
Debbie
succeeded.
Downer, Negative Nancy.
You don't go to, people, we love negativity. So unfortunately, we do too often go to negative people. But just being honest, think about, you don't go to people who have failed for how to succeed in something. It doesn't mean we can't learn lessons from people that have failed. But generally speaking, we don't do that. So why would we apply that to marriage? So that's my thought on that.
Yeah.
Who is another? Do you have another person?
This is a big one. And it's just male close friends, right? Not even going to necessarily call it a best friend. Just have a male close friend, things like that.
Oh, you saying as a woman?
Yeah.
If you have male best friends.
Okay. And then let's say if you are the husband in the relationship, you shouldn't be going to your close female friends. Well, let's have any close female
not to derail the topic altogether, but that's a whole nother can of worms because some would argue, and I probably am more closer to this stance, and I think we talked about this. We did a video on this already.
Yeah.
We'll pin that up to the top here. But should you even have close friends that are the opposite sex anyway? So that's a whole nother thing. So go ahead and I'll let you finish.
But some people do, right?
They do.
Some people do because they grew up. We grew up across the street, but it's not like that, blah, blah, blah. You should not be telling them your deep issues within your marriage. And I would say especially if they're single, okay? Because here's the thing with those best friends of the opposite sex. Y'all know each other like the back of your hand. Y'all families are close-knit, probably, things like that. You never know. They could be plotting, okay?
That's crazy.
They're waiting for this space to open up. So are they going to necessarily give you the best advice for your marriage, for it to work? I don't know about that. You have to best friends turn into partners all the time. This happens
I can tell you right now, no. You probably aren't going to get it.
All the time. Exactly. And when you're talking about like what you could be arguing about is like, oh, I don't feel like being intimate right now and he wants to, whatever, or and this and this and this and that. You definitely shouldn't be talking to a person of the opposite sex about this. Like, that's too personal within your marriage. It's not the right person to go to at all.
She said it all. I mean, pretty much for that. I mean, it's not really much to add.
Yeah.
You just want to be careful.
Yeah.
We were talking private details. We're talking stuff like that, like your sex life and things like that. You're talking about finances. We're talking about like real concerns, all that type of stuff. There's so many things that I feel like in general you shouldn't just be talking to people about. So if you're talking to people, if you're talking to single people, if you're talking to people that have been through divorces, if you're talking to people opposite sex, there's just so many dynamics where that can just go completely left. And there's so many more. We could talk about parents. Sometimes you don't need to let your mom know every detail about your marriage. If you're a mama's boy or if you're whatever the equivalent is for women, daddy's girl and all that stuff. Yeah. You got to leave your parents out of it to an extent. Like, they should not know about every beef, every argument you all have or whatever.
Yeah.
If you all want to, and this is also, and I'm going to bring in the more controversial one to wrap this up with, but if you want to bring your parents in on the equation, both of you need to be going to them. If you feel like you have parents that have had a healthy marriage and both of you just genuinely need help, both of you should go to them. But this is the more controversial one. And I'm not going to say don't do this, but I'm going to say proceed with caution with this one. And I'm going to parse it out differently. An individual spouse going to their pastor about private details in a relationship. An individual spouse. And what I mean by that is, sure, pastors are confidants. They're not supposed to share information that they're not supposed to share information that is spoken to them in private. So from that front, that's not an issue. But when it comes to certain private matters and things like that, I'm not saying don't talk to your pastor, but I think you should be very cautious in how that's. I'm going to speak from my perspective as a man. If my wife goes to the pastor to talk about something that maybe she's dealing with me, and especially if it's something we haven't talked about, but let's assume we have talked about it, but she goes to the pastor, I think that there is something innately in men where you're gonna feel a little bit like, one, you're gonna feel like you got told on in a sense. Two, it feels a little bit uncomfortable because you didn't feel like it was something you were unaware of, you didn't feel like you were a part of, and it's just something about that can sometimes be that can make you feel a way, is what I would say. I don't have really the words to describe it now, but what I will say is you want to go with your significant other to your pastor as much as you can, unless there is very serious situation where it's like, I just cannot trust this man anymore. This is gotten so out of hand.
You're unsafe.
And I have of course, if you're unsafe, the obvious, when we're talking about private details, I'm not going into like things that are like, this is like life or death, or this is like really serious business. Like in extreme circumstances, you do want to go to someone that's very trusted. And we'll talk more about who those people are. We'll even do a future video on that. But you want to go to your pastor in a very serious situation alone. If you can't go with your husband, you want to use wisdom in going to your pastor alone about it, because that can make a situation worse. Because what are you going to do? Like, so I talked to pastor about you. Like, wait, what? That can just create a whole nother dynamic. And reason I say it, and this is what I was trying to say before earlier, is you might make your husband close off to you now because he knows you're talking to the pastor about him. And I've heard that happen for many. And what I'll add, as far as, so we talked about who not to go to. The main thing is you want to find people that are like-minded. You want to make sure that it is united with your husband, where you and him have agreed that you can talk to this friend who also is married about marital matters. So we have friends that are married that we've given each other over the years permission to talk about. Like, we've had accountability groups in our church, and we've given each other permission, like, hey, in fact, we've encouraged to talk to them about the issues. Maybe they can talk some sense into you.
I was going to say the same thing.
So we've done that, but
No, I agree completely. That's good.
All right, so let us know in the comments who else you should not share private details with about your marriage. We'd love to hear your thoughts. And before you head out, hit that thumbs up and subscribe to the channel.